Horse racing has a long tradition in this country. The Queen's Plate, for instance. It's older than Confederation. But it's also an industry that gets a lot of help from government subsidies. That has not gone unnoticed by past provincial finance ministers. And in 2019, the Auditor General found the industry somewhat lacking in transparency and accountability. With us now for a closer look, we welcome John Snoblin, strategy consultant with MK&A, former PC cabinet minister who took part in the previous Liberal government's horse racing industry transition panel. Jessica Buckley, senior vice president, standardbred and thoroughbred racing at Woodbine Entertainment. Nick Kukos, resident handicapper and former vice president, corporate affairs at Ajax Downs. And Scott Stinson, national sports columnist for Post Media. And we are happy to welcome all of you to our table here for a discussion about something we don't talk about very much on this program, horse racing. We don't talk about it much. But as we suggested, it's been a huge thing in this province for a very long time. John, start us off, because I want you to tell us when the golden age of horse racing was, because I don't think we're in it now. When was the golden age?
My experience is whatever your period of time entering is the golden age. You know, being my age in the province, I think back to Northern Dancer, you know, to a horse that changed thoroughbred racing in the world.
E.P. Taylor's horse.
Yeah, the Armstrong brothers' investments in the Ambro horses in the standardbred industry. You know, the Pico family in the quarter horse industry.
So that's 4 decades ago.
You know, yeah, and a time when you could fill Woodbine, you could fill that place because Secretariat came to town. The Secretariat's last race, you couldn't get in the building. Right. You know, horse racing was a vibrant part of a lot of different communities back then. People today might look at, you know, horses that, or horse racing that's more contemporary, you know, Lexi Lou, the filly that won the Queen's Plate a few years ago, you know, beautiful filly. Maybe someone young would look at that horse and other horses like that with the same kind of eye.
Once upon a time, horse racing drew more people than football, than hockey, than baseball, than basketball. People filled the stands. Here's what it looks like today. Sheldon, you want to bring this graphic up and I'll read it out for those listening on podcast. Ontario has more racetracks than comparable jurisdictions. We've got 15 in total. The industry supports 45,000 full-time jobs. The Ontario government says it contributes $2 billion annually to our economy. How would you, Jessica, diagnose the health of the industry today, however?
Yeah, the industry certainly has some sustainability and some stability, thanks to the long-term funding agreement that we have in place with the government. And we're working extremely hard to grow interest in the sport and to innovate and to rely on technology in order to get the next generation interested in what's going on. And when you spoke about the heyday of racing, one of the things that happened in the past was that in the 60s, when television executives came to racetracks and said, how about we put your races on TV, they made a critical mistake. And other sports got on television at that time, and their popularity only grew. And racing has had to catch up a bit from that time. But we're using technology now to do that.
How would you characterize the state of the industry today?
I see it a little differently right now. I think we're in a very critical stage. Our foal crops are down, our race days are down. Our breed program has been suffering over the last 10 years. I think we're at a stage where we're at a crossroads right now, and if there isn't significant changes in the industry, I don't see a bright future.
Let's talk about some of those changes as we go forward here. Before we do that, though, the Auditor General for the province of Ontario brought out a report taking a look at the horse racing industry, and here is what some of that report had to say. Over the last 5 years, the government has provided about $500 million in funding to horse racing, but it's not significantly closer to becoming self-sustaining, the industry that is. Last year, the Ford government pledged an additional $10 million per year to the industry's breeders. In 2018, the industry signed a long-term funding agreement. Jessica, you referred to this. The government providing up to $105 million per year until the year 2037. In 2018-19, more than half of the industry's revenue was generated by government sources. The Auditor General says income from wagering continues to decline and is not sufficient to cover racetrack operating costs and purses. The aim of provincial funding has shifted away from encouraging the industry to be financially independent to essentially sustaining the industry. The industry, one last bullet point here, the industry, the auditor says, lacks transparency and public accountability. There's no public reporting by racetrack of wagering revenue, purses paid, revenue and expenses related to racing operations, or key employment stats. Scott, sum all that up for me and paint a picture of the industry as you see it.
Well, I think what has happened in Ontario specifically is we saw 6, 7, 8 years ago, the Ontario government changed a thing called the Slots at Racetrack program, which was something that was introduced in the mid to late 90s.
Right, John Snoblin's government brought that in.
When,
Yeah, I can
when
vaguely
they were,
remember it.
When they were expanding casinos, they said, well, we're going to make sure that the horse racing industry doesn't get overwhelmed by this, so they allowed them to have slot machines, or they wanted them to have slot machines at horse tracks, and as part of that, they would direct some of the money towards what they call the horse people, the horse industry. Then the government of Dalton McGuinty decided they didn't want to do that anymore. They said that was $350 million a year. That was going to horse people that could go to schools and hospitals and those kind of things. And that really is the point at which the industry has taken a very sharp turn. And there's been, as you said, all this transitional money sort of meant to keep it afloat. But fundamentally, the problem was over that period of time, interest in horse racing declined, and it was kept afloat by this slot machine money, which suddenly they didn't have access to anymore. And that's where the problems, I think, began.
John, did the industry get too hooked on that slot machine money?
Oh, for sure, because I think the slot machine money, there was a large volume of it. It took the industry away from its customers, from horse players, from fans. There was so much money coming in that it didn't have to work that hard on things like let's get more media on this sport, on things like let's recruit new ownership for horses. So it really put a pause for 10 or 12 years on the industry going through the kinds of changes that all industries have to go through.
And Nick, when the McGuinty government made that decision to disassociate the slots at, what was it called? Slots at Racetrack program, with the breeders and with the horse industry, what impact did that have?
Well, it was devastating. It was something that we were blindsided with. And quite frankly, it came about from a transparency and accountability issue, where at that time, Paul Godfrey was head of the OLG, and he got into it with Woodbine Entertainment back in those days. Woodbine refused to provide information to the OLG. They were partners at that time, and the government decided, well, you know, if you're not going to be transparent, you're not going to be accountable, guess what? We're going to change the game up. And they changed it, and they blindsided us.
Did, in your view, I mean, we've seen what the
Yes.
Auditor General had to say about transparency and accountability. Do you think the industry had a problem with it?
I think that there's been massive changes since that time, which are great changes. And as far as the governance goes on Woodbine Entertainment, things are 100% different at this time, which is fantastic. Now with the creation of Ontario Racing, which incorporates all representatives from all the tracks and the horse people's groups across Ontario, there's much more accountability going forward through Ontario Racing to OLG, how those funds are being spent on the operating side, on the purse account side to the horse people. So I think a lot of good things have been put in place since that time.
I'm going to read between the lines here and say, and surmise that if you're saying we don't have a problem today, it's better now, that suggests it was a problem back in the day.
To be honest, I'm not saying that there was an issue. I'm saying that we responded to the criticism at the time. I'm not saying there was an issue, but if there have been changes to respond to that. There were many tracks across Ontario that were involved in the discussion at that time. It was devastating to the industry to lose the Slots at Racetracks program overnight, and thankfully the government realized the number of jobs that were lost at that time, and they've rectified it since, and the reporting has been much better since as well.
You agree with that, Nick?
No, I don't. I definitely don't agree with it. I think that what's happened is this whole subsidy issue, and it was a subsidy, we failed to realize back in the 2000s it was a subsidy. We thought it was an entitlement. We were entitled to have this revenue stream. Well, it's not. The problem right now with the subsidy that's in place is that it's not going to the benefit of the horse people. It's the horse people that are creating the jobs. The 45,000 jobs that you've just put on the screen, we go back to the Sadinsky report in 2008, he quoted 55,000 jobs. Those jobs are created by horse people. They breed horses, they own horses, they race horses. Yet a small piece of that goes to the horse people. You talked about the Auditor General report, $578 million in industry revenue in 2019. only 140 million of that goes to purses. That's a very small percentage.
Purses meaning the winnings.
The winnings, that's right. That's a very, very small percentage. I mean, I did a study back in 2005 in North America which showed that horse people put $2 billion into purchasing and carrying of horses a year, and they chase $1 billion in revenue. That's a net loss. We have to have a bigger percentage going to purses because we need racing opportunities, because if we don't have racing opportunities, we're not going to have an industry in the future.
Let's acknowledge, Scott, off the top, that all professional sports are subsidized in some way by the taxpayer, whether it's we're going to help you build your arena or your football stadium, or there's a
If you're
considerable.
holding the Grey Cup, there's access to
Absolutely,
public money
all
for
that.
those kind of things.
So how troubled are you by the fact that this industry gets a considerable subsidy from the taxpayer?
Well, I think the problem with it is that they came in saying, if you take this slot money away, you'll devastate the industry, which was true, obviously, as we've discussed. It had sort of got inflated by all this slot money that was pouring in. And then in the years since, they haven't really been able to figure out a way to transition to an industry that is sustainable on its own merits. And that's the concern, is that initially the government said, okay, we realize we're taking all this money away with no warning. Sorry about that. Here's some transitional money as we look to figure out ways to make the business sustainable. 5 years go by. Now they've basically said, we're not really trying to figure out a way to make it sustainable other than we're going to keep this funding arrangement so that it can exist. And that change of what is it we need to do to make people want to bet on horse races, come to horse races, have it as an entertainment option they want to do. I'm not sure I have the answer to how to do that. I just don't. It doesn't seem like in the years since that McGuinty sort of took his big swipe at horse racing, it doesn't feel to me like those things have changed.
What's the biggest problem horse racing has today, John?
Well, I think the reason why we are where we are now is because the government of the day, McGuinty government, forgot one thing, and that is horses don't have employment insurance. So there was that level of unemployment for horses was not going to be a healthy thing. There's a lot of challenges going forward that every industry faces. What Nick talked about, where there's $3 chasing a dollar in terms of investment in this industry, has kind of always been the case in some way, shape, or form, which is why it creates so much economic churn for a dollar invested, which is why government after government around North America and around the world has decided to help keep the horse racing going because of the economic churn that it creates. Now, that's a level of investment that the government's measured. Now, 3 different governments have measured in Ontario and said about $100 million a year is about the happy number where the industry can go forward and we get that economic churn. The challenge for the industry is to work as an industry, to think as an industry, and to do the right investments so it creates its own future.
Okay, but there aren't too many people in the province of Ontario, I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think there are not that many people who object to the massive public subsidies that have gone into, for example, keeping the auto manufacturers afloat, particularly back in 2008 when it looked like 2 of them were going to go under. Do you sense a great deal of upset in the province over the subsidies going to horse racing?
I don't think so. I don't think this is a huge political issue, to be honest with you. I think it's been a problem for governments to understand this industry because while it may not be complicated, it's darn sure complex. And so it's been very hard for governments to understand the difference that the industry makes, particularly in rural Ontario, and what the metrics are that make the industry work.
Steve,
Please,
if
Jessica,
I may, I just wanted to make a point on the $100 million and the sustainability piece as it relates to Woodbine and Woodbine Mohawk Park. A large amount of that is part of a commercial lease agreement with the government for the gaming partners at our sites. So there is a large portion of that $100 million that comes through a commercial lease agreement, which is a very large factor in the sustainability of racing at Woodbine and Mohawk and our move forward plans. So we certainly do have a plan moving forward to be self-sustainable.
Okay, let me read this, though, from the Toronto Star. This is how they reported this last year. Ontario's Finance Minister Victor Fedeli announced last week a new multi-million-dollar funding program set not to boost education or health care, not improve rural internet services, and certainly not animal protection post-OSPCA opt-out, but rather horse racing. Ontario will provide $10 million per year to horse racing, an industry about as necessary as the circus, as ethical as marine land, and as worthy of such funding as any other form of mere exploitative entertainment. Of all sectors in need of funding, the Ontario government's multi-million-dollar support of an industry as outdated and elitist as horse racing is simply unnecessary, unsustainable, and even unethical. Jessica Scott-Reid, Toronto Star. There's no question she's not on the fence about this. What's your reaction?
No. So my reaction is that what's the facts that aren't included there are the number of jobs in rural communities that horse racing supports across the province. So over 20,000 jobs are specifically in the agricultural sector, and then it's over 40,000 jobs in the province related to racing. So that's the huge piece that's missing. And the agricultural piece of horse racing that's included in the fabric of Ontario that's been here since the beginning of Canada. So I think that it's important to note that. And then on the ethical side, I can assure you that the horses that race at Woodbine and Mohawk are treated exceptionally well, and the people that work in horse racing are there because they love horses. And that is a huge part of their lives, and they treat these animals like part of their family.
Okay,
So
let's pick this apart, Scott. As a job creation program and as a means of maintaining a kind of a culture in the province that's been around for 150 years, are the subsidies defensible?
I think the reason you asked before about whether it was controversial, it's not a ton of money in the grand scheme of the Ontario budget. I mean, $100 million, if that's what we're talking today, and it's supposed to actually get a little smaller over the next 20 years of this agreement, it's not a huge amount. If you're talking about supporting what it says are 45,000 jobs, we'll see. There's a study ongoing now that the Auditor General or somebody's doing to try to put an actual number on how many jobs would be affected by the industry. So we'll see what they come up with. I think 45,000 might be a little high, but that's fine. That's the way these studies often go. I think ultimately, from a dollars and cents standpoint, it probably is defensible because, as Jessica says, there are jobs in rural areas where if you take them away, then you get into this whole problem of, well, what does the job become now? If you're working on a farm in southwestern Ontario and suddenly the horse racing industry is gone, it's not going to be an easy thing to just turn around and find new work for those people in that part of the province where there's already labor issues and jobs have disappeared and the Rust Belt kind of thing has already impacted that region. So in a way, it's almost probably easier for the government to just stay with what it's doing, which is, I think, why this agreement was made for the next 19 years, because then it was a problem they didn't have to deal with.
Nick,
Let's talk about jobs for a second, because I do agree. These jobs are mostly from people that are unskilled, uneducated. They'd be a burden to society if they didn't have this outlet for work. They work 7 days a week. They're at the racetrack at 4:30 in the morning or at the farm at 4:30 in the morning. They love their animals. And there's no reason in the world why the government shouldn't recognize that. It's very, very important. I think it would cost society in Ontario more than $100 million a year if we had these people out there unemployed.
John, what's your view on that?
These are people who are hard to employ, and I explained to Kathleen Wynne that I'm one of those. So, look, 3 different governments have had a look at this file. And as Jessica said, this isn't really $100 million, because if you back out the amount that great gift to horse racing from E.P. Taylor, Woodbine, that is the strength, that's the foundation of this funding. The amount of churn in the rural economy justifies the public investment. The question is, where do we go with that public investment? How do we have that maximize the return to the industry and build a healthy industry in the province? That's the challenge now.
So it would be how devastating, mostly to rural Ontario, if for whatever reason this industry either lessened or disappeared?
Well, it's very difficult to measure that. We tried. The John Wilkinson, Elmer Buchanan, and I tried to get a pretty good measure on that. I think we got it, between the goalposts.
You're better known as the 3 wise men, is that correct?
I had 2 wise men and a guy bringing him coffee.
Okay.
Actually, we should just, for argument's sake here, explain. You were part of a 3-person, all parties. You were the Conservative. Right. Elmer Buchanan was the New Democrat. John Wilkinson was the Liberal. all former ministers of the Crown who were tasked by Kathleen Wynne?
No, by the McGuinty
By
government.
McGuinty, to look at the state of play and see what could be done about it.
Yeah, and we issued a couple of reports that helped guide governments to where we are now. And where we are now is the auditor's report, I think, indicates that we have to have some more measures. OLG is working on that. Ontario Race Management is working on that. And I think they have a report coming out this year that'll help with those measures. So that'll help answer the question. The challenge for the industry, the government's not going to run the industry. They don't want to run the industry. They want the industry to run itself. And the industry is more used to fighting with itself. So the challenge for the industry is to kind of grow up to the place where they can make the sort of decisions an industry needs to make about investments for its future. That's the size of the footprint of horse racing in the province of Ontario, where you put how much and where you put the dollars for purses. You know, what's the support network, and how do we take this product and put it out to the people who we want to have be entertained by it?
I've got to put that to Jessica. Is the industry, in your view, has it not grown up enough, as John Snoblin says, to make the hard calls that it needs to make to be more fiscally self-sustaining?
Well, John makes some excellent points, and the whole formation of Ontario Racing is to be able to have the industry make those decisions for itself. And I think it's working well so far, and there'll be lots of discussion over the next number of years. But the most important piece is the working together. And there's always been different groups in the industry that have had very strong opinions about how things should happen.
What does that mean?
There's a difference of opinions, shall we say. It's a large province, and so the important piece now is moving forward and working together, and Ontario Racing is a big part of that.
But just give me one example here. What's a big issue that horse racing is trying to grapple with, on which there would be very divergent and hard to reconcile views?
Well, I think some of the points that Nick has made, just on how funding is going to be spent on purses, what types of races are being run. I mean, very specific types of issues become contentious because there's so much passion. People have so much passion in this industry, and people have bred a horse and raised a horse since birth, and they want to see it have success at the racetrack. And there's so many things that come into play. But it's important to work together, and I know we've said that, but I can't stress it enough.
I want to ask Nick about, you've mentioned this word horse people a number of times, the phrase, horse people. Are horse people different from other people?
Absolutely.
How so?
Different breed of individual. I mean, we're so enamored with our horse. We're just so involved in racing. It's a lifestyle for us. It's just like it's so much of a lifestyle. We're so enthusiastic. I'm throwing my glasses around. I just can't say we're very passionate. I do want to touch on Ontario Racing because, if it's okay,
Please.
Again, I see it a little differently. I have a real problem with Ontario Racing. I don't see it as self-governance. I see it as a group of people that are self-serving. I really, really do. There are two major stakeholders that are not at the table on Ontario Racing.
First of all, who's in Ontario Racing?
Ontario Racing is made up of Woodbine Entertainment, a couple of independent people, a standardbred horsemen's organization called COSA, which was created by Woodbine, and then you have the HBBA and you have the Quarter Horse Racing Association of Ontario, makes up the majority of that board. But the two key stakeholders that are not there are the CTHS, which are the thoroughbred breeders in the province of Ontario, and the Ontario Harness Horse Association, which is the biggest standardbred association in the province of Ontario.
Why are they not
They're
part of
not
it?
at the table because they have some differences with the people at the table. My understanding is that they wouldn't sign some documents that would bring them to the table. So that in itself has created a very difficult situation among horse people.
Is this a problem?
Well, I can speak to it a little bit from the Woodbine perspective. There are 11 seats on the board of Ontario Racing, 2 of which are Woodbine and Mohawk. So the other 9 seats are representatives of the horse groups that Nick has mentioned and the other small racetracks across the province. Both groups that he mentioned were invited to join Ontario Racing and chose not to. There is a representative for the thoroughbred breeders at this time, but there is not currently a representative from the CTHS, as Nick mentioned. But again, everyone is represented.
Let's go to Scott on this one. Are racetracks doing what's required today? And we should remember that, you know, back in the day, there was sort of a monopoly for people who wanted to sort of gamble on sports. You go to the racetrack and that was it. There was no lotteries. There's certainly, you know, nobody's betting on, anyway. It had its own thing. Now, horse racing is competing against everything. Yeah. Are they doing enough to attract new eyeballs?
Well, that's the big question. And when you asked before if the subsidies are justifiable, I think you can, as I said, justify them on the numbers now. But the problem is, so the amount wagered in Ontario by Ontarians on Ontario races is down something like 45% over the last 10 years. If that continues, if you're another 50% over the next 10 years, now you've got it like a quarter of the industry you had 20 years ago. And at that point, you start to go, well, why are we continuing to subsidizing this industry that is going straight down this way? So that's part of the question. And are they doing enough? Well, I mean, clearly not, in terms of when you're seeing the amount of wagering going on at tracks declining and by the amounts it has. They are fighting, I think, a lot of pressures, whether it's the sports and entertainment dollar, the fact that you can stay at home and watch, you know, any sporting event really on TV now if you have the right subscription package, or you can watch it on your laptop or whatever. Fantasy sports provides gambling opportunities that it didn't not even that long ago, but there are now daily fantasy things that people can gamble on. Offshore betting and using your phone to gamble is a gray area in terms of legality, but it definitely happens. And now we're seeing, I mean, I think it's entirely possible that gambling will be legalized, you know, sports gambling in Canada at some point in the near future, because it has been legalized in the United States. And that's a whole nother pressure that they're going to fight. Now, you could solve the problem maybe by putting sports books at horse tracks, and now maybe that's kind of getting back to kind of a slots arrangement where all of a sudden there's a gambling audience going to horse tracks that wasn't otherwise going. Maybe that's the solution here. But to your sort of opening question of are they doing enough to grow the audience? Well, the evidence shows that they haven't been able to grow the audience, and that's going to be their big challenge going forward.
John, it's not like people don't love to gamble. They do love to gamble on sports, but somehow horse racing has become a diminished asset in the whole crown of sportsdom. How come?
Well, they had a monopoly for a long, long time. And so when you interrupt that monopoly and you have more competition in that marketplace, you know, different people who like to wager in different ways are going to be attracted to different things. And I agree with everything that's been said, but there are some bright lights too. I mean, if you go to Ajax Downs when they're having a horse race and you see the neighborhoods, the stands are packed. I mean, it makes an impact in that neighborhood. If you go to Mohawk now, that it's open year round, and I live out by that racetrack, it's a very popular destination for people. So Queen's Plate is probably a bigger spectacle now than it was 20 years ago, because we're actually working to invite people to come out and look at the product. And there's nothing wrong with the product. The horses racing against each other, doing what they're bred to do, is something that people have loved to watch forever.
Oh, it's thrilling. It's a great spectacle.
It's a fabulous sport. Finding the right way to present it to a new audience, you know, that's a challenge for the whole industry. There's no one silver bullet for this, but there are bright lights. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things that are going on right now in the marketplace that are very, very good.
If you go to the track, though, Jessica, do you see many, for example, young families, as opposed to wizened old veterans, as it were?
Yeah, we do. So most certainly we have a lot of retired people that come to the track, but we have a lot of families that come. And John was speaking of Woodbine Mohawk Park in Milton. It's very family focused, and we have a lot of events that invite families to come. So there's people of all ages that come to racing. But just touching on some of the things that we're doing to attract people back into wagering on racing. Number one, it is a game of skill versus a game of luck. And there's a learning curve that comes with handicapping racing. And lots of people enjoy the basic gaming that happens in a casino and on a slot machine, which is very different than handicapping horse racing. So that learning curve needs to happen. one of the things Woodbine is working on is a new application called Dark Horse. And Dark Horse is in beta at the moment. It will launch later this year, but it's using artificial intelligence to give the intelligence to the user to make wagers and hedge their bets and be able to make smart wagers and have a better chance of making back their money and earning some money as well. So that's something we're working on for the next generation, and we will continue to innovate that way.
I wonder, though, Nick, I mean, I do recall when I was a kid, when you watched the sportscasts, they used to tell you the results of races at Woodbine or at Mohawk or whatever.
Sure, used to drive home, and on CFRB, they'd give us the race results. That's
They don't do
correct.
that anymore.
They don't. We've done a horrible job. I mean, we just really have done a horrible job in our industry in communicating. And some of that goes back to the Slots at Racetrack program days, where we became complacent. We became very, very complacent in those days. You know, we need to be creative. We're in as Scott said, we're in a very competitive environment right now. It's not like what it was in the 70s and the 80s when I was around betting on horses, because I didn't, other than a bookmaker, there was nowhere else to bet. I either had my bookie or I had to go to the racetrack. Well, bookie didn't always pay me, so I started going to the racetrack. But anyways, I mean, we've got to be more creative. I mean, this is so dear to my heart. I look at Woodbine, and there's no one in the world that wants Woodbine to be more successful than I do.
I bet she does.
No, well, no, I don't think so, because, well, she may love the sport as much as I do, but she doesn't love it more. I can guarantee you that. Okay. I love this sport, and I want it to succeed. But when I look at this organization and what they've done with their teletheaters, for example, you walk into a teletheater anywhere in this province, there isn't one teller that could tell a novice bettor how to bet. They walk in there and these customers are lost. The only teletheater in Ontario that has tellers is Ajax Downs, and we insisted on having our tellers there because many of our customers bet through a teller. Our biggest bettors bet through a teller. They don't want to bet on a machine. They're afraid something may go wrong.
Okay, but you can't expect somebody to go up to a teller and say, how should I bet on this race?
Absolutely, it happens all the time.
Really? And they're supposed to give you advice?
Derby Day, no, not on who to bet, but how to bet.
Oh, okay.
How to bet is critical, because most people don't know how to bet. They're intimidated by horse racing.
Gotcha.
And as Jessica said, we have to educate these people. Okay. We really do, and it's a long process. You can't turn a customer into a horse bettor overnight.
Understood. Please.
Can I respond, Steve? Thank you. I hear you, Nick, and I think that we spend a great deal in attracting the new customer to our large events, like the Queen's Plate, like the Pepsi North America Cup, where
sorry to interrupt, but
Yes.
when you win the Queen's Plate, how much money do you win?
It's a $1 million purse,
That's
so
not bad.
60% of that to the winner, and then on down. Yeah.
You don't get the
but
50
very-
guineas anymore.
I think they
Very large day for us, attendance-wise. It's
many
a
people would show
fashion
up to that?
event. 37,000. So
Okay.
it's a wonderful event from a fashion standpoint, food, music, racing, excitement, and you know we also have a lot of people on track on every day, but especially that day, teaching new people how to bet and getting them involved in racing. But I did want to just speak to the sports wagering that Scott touched on as well, because it's truly something that is happening today, and we know there are customers that sit at our track and they're on an app and they're making sports bets. And
On the horses?
No, on other sports.
On other stuff.
Yes, so it is not legal in Canada today, but we know this gray market is happening. So we feel that it will be legalized at some point. We also are very adamant about horse racing having a piece of and being involved somehow in the future of sports wagering. It's something that we do today. Single event sports betting is what a race is today. Yeah. So we have the technology and the expertise, and we hope that when the discussion comes around that Woodbine can be involved.
Okay. John, a couple of minutes left here, and I want to ask you, what does success for this industry look like in your eyes?
I think the most important thing is to be able to provide the next generation of people growing up in Ontario with the opportunity to have the same relationship with a horse that I had. The same opportunity to see the heart, to see the passion of that industry, to see those great athletes compete. I mean, If we don't preserve that, then shame on us as a generation of horse people for not being able to pass that on. And if we can't take a product as good as horse racing and make it attractive to a significant audience, we just haven't done our job.
Scott, same to you. What does success look like for this business?
Well, I'm going to compare it to the CFO, which I know is something near and dear to your heart. But in Toronto and the GTA specifically, we've had the same discussion about the Argonauts and their inability to grow a local fan base and to get the younger generation interested in it. And people say similar things all the time about great game, great athletes, good people. Why can't we get more people to come to Argo games? They changed the stadium, they moved them. All these things happen, and still the same questions are being asked. And I would say it's the same thing for horse racing, where they need to figure out a way to get younger people interested in it in a way that they haven't been able to do yet. And that means making it cool somehow, whether it's because there's other sports wagering available there. I think that would go a long way towards helping. But that's the kind of thing that needs to happen because I'm in my 40s. I don't know too many people younger than me who have ever gone to a Woodbine or a Mohawk to say, like on their own. They might have gone with their parents or their grandparents, but to like go out with friends and do that, especially in a place like the GTA where there's so much other competition, that's what has to happen, and we'll see.
Good. That's our last word on the subject. Thank you all for coming in tonight. John Snoblin, the former Progressive Conservative Cabinet Minister, and Nick Kukos, resident handicapper, who's going to tell me what the odds are on getting off on time tonight.
Absolutely. 3-1.
3-1. Okay, very good. Scott Stinson, you can read him in Post Media, and Jessica Buckley, the Senior VP at Woodbine Entertainment. Good of all of you to come into TVO tonight. They're at the Post.
And they're off.
And we're off. There we go.
Thank you, Steve.
Great job.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.